The 2008 crisis, a crisis that has led to the destruction of homes, jobs, and savings. There were many sides to be blamed here. The parties, the politicians, the Fed's response, it was inadequate. That is for certain. And I'm here to tell you what happened. My name is Hassan and welcome to InfoRich. So I don't want to take more of your time, but here are the 6 main reasons of why it happened and why it was a big deal. Low interest rates and low lending standards have led to a significant spike in borrowing for housing, resulting in people who do not even meet the basic measures, which is millions, borrowing money beyond their affordable means. Later, these banks and subprime lenders, subprime mortgages are given to those behind their payments and under the 600 FICO score, a credit worthiness measure, maintain their loan paces by reselling these mortgages on the secondary markets to free up some cash to issue more mortgages. Well, not enough. Financial firms who bought these repackaged, issued mortgages bundled them, known as tranches, and sold them to the investors under the alias mortgage-backed securities. Well, what happened to the investors? Investors realized the jig was up when people started to default on their payments, preferably the mortgage payments, creating a house of cards scenario and making the issued papers pretty much nothing but a paper. Then the US government stepped in and bailed these mighty bankers and blamed it on people who were borrowing it with an unbacked source instead of the regulatory bodies, banks, and rating agencies. So how were the lenders so confident that they would make money out of this? It was because they were receiving interest on the loans, and if the borrower faulted, they would take the ownership of the house. Furthermore, as the housing prices have consistently increased, this would leave them with a nice profit. Markets have always gone up, which fueled the risk-taking and heavy debt-taking, as it was practically impossible for anything to go down. And also, how could the housing market fail as the property has always been valuable and appreciated? So those were the 6 elements that has led to the destruction of the economy as we know it in 2008. And now I'm going to be detailing it even more of the historical background and what happened. Oh, have you noticed? Yeah, that's right. I got another t-shirt. So don't ever try to write that in the comment section because I'm right ahead of you. From 1980s up until 2007, the US economy has experienced bursts and booms, which is pretty much the natural cyclical periodic transitions that the economy goes through, which pretty much defined this era as the Great Moderation. Well, these bust and boom cycles were seen everywhere and still are seen everywhere, from Wall Street to the crypto market and even to the cats that are mating in your back garden. The repeal of the Great Depression era legislation called the GlassSteagall Act, I hope that I pronounced that correctly, that separated the commercial banking and the investment banking that was signed by Eisenhower. With the repeal of this law, that it was signed in by Bill Clinton under the name Financial Service Modernization Act in 1999, also called Graham-Leach-Bliley, which are great names for me to pronounce, right? So the GlassSteagall Act over-intertwined of the commercial and the investment sector, with banks pretty much taking a significant amount of risk with depositors' cash, but also promoting their positions that they underwrote. Right? So the primary change that the law ushered in was creating a new kind of financial institution, the financial holding company, which is FHC. Pretty much FHC was essentially an extension of the concept of a bank holding a company, an umbrella organization that could own subsidiaries involved in different financial activities. This was a compromise because now the security, the insurance, underwriting, and depository institution sales would still be restricted. On the other hand, now banks could be part of this giant corporation that involved in those aforementioned activities. According to this insider article, this opened up the gates to the flood. After that, banks and the financial brokerages had these wiggle room to pursue an expansion that led to this acquisition that some people still call too big to fail banks and institutions. In order to boost mortgage lending, the government pretty much used two sponsored corporations. And the insurers who were lagging behind this competition, of course they want to make money. So what they did was they tried to make money with these mortgage-backed securities by joining the gamble by the usage of credit default swaps, derivatives that pay out mortgage to borrowers cash if the agent failed. And again, what could stop the housing market, right? Then comes the risky mother lovers who love to bet on shit, right? And they wanted to jump on this cash pile. So what they did was they did this by the multitude, right? So with so many people not being able to pay on their mortgages, the cycle went on.
All right, open your boxes. Open your boxes. 1, 2, 3. You get a car! 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 Everybody gets a car!
Investment banks came back on the scene to jack up their profits by initiating something called CDO, collateralized debt obligation. Very much akin to mortgage-backed securities, but riskier. So on top of all this nuttiness, they began these complex derivative investments, aka synthetic CDOs, to bet even more if people would be able to make money off of these investments or not. Of course, there's a way to ensure that these bundle up securities are sold off to the investors with a secured cash stream, right? I mean, there must have been some way of surfacing the truth. Well, so many of the borrowers are not going to be able to make up the payments, right? So rating agencies, they could have done something here, right? Well, not exactly. What they did was they issued AAAs. That's right, AAAs. So what are these AAAs? AAA is pretty much the highest possible rating assigned to an issuer's bonds by any major credit rating agencies. AAA rated bonds have a high degree of credit worthiness because their issuers can quickly meet financial commitments and have the lowest risk of default. Standard & Poor's and Fitch Ratings are some of the rating agencies that are responsible of issuing these ratings. So in 2007, the awaited happened. Foreclosures, people lagging behind their payments, flooded the markets. The housing supply has taken over the demand by a significant margin, and boom. As a result, housing prices fell by an unprecedented amount that no investor foresaw, which then precipitated the 2008 crisis. Financial companies have taken a large hit. 75% of the highest safety rating, 70% of them failed. Largest bankruptcy in the US history happened as Lehman Brothers went under. All these banks that were tied up with the crisis received billions of dollars in taxpayers' money in order to actually jumpstart the economy and, of course, to prevent them from failing because they were too big to fail. So what is next? Can this happen again? And our banks are still too big to fail? Well, actually, yes. Many of the country's biggest banks are more prominent now than ever before the financial crisis. JP Morgan Chase has now $2.5 trillion in assets, compared with $1.5 trillion in 2007. Bank of America has about $2.3 trillion in assets, compared with $1.7 trillion in 2007. The holdings of Wells Fargo are near $2 trillion, which is more than double what they were right before the crisis. Well, if and when another crisis hits, the biggest players will be far larger than they were during the last crash, according to a 2017 S&P Global Market Intelligence report. However, banks did not get out of this without a scratch, as many people believe. Bank of America, for example, paid a whopping $17 billion to resolve allegations that it knowingly sold faulty mortgage securities that contributed to the financial crisis. Well, on the other hand, JP Morgan Chase paid $13 billion. In 2008, government seized the troubled mortgage giants as the housing market crash unraveled. Taxpayers pumped billions into the companies, but over the past few years, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which buy mortgages from lenders and then package them into securities to sell to investors, have been spewing profits that feed into government's coffers. Fannie Mae, for example, took around $119 billion in taxpayers' bailout money, but has handed over $167 billion to the Treasury Department. The smaller Freddie Mac took $71 billion in bailout money and has turned over almost $113 billion in profit. Generally, the economists agree that the financial system is safer. However, the 2010 Dodd-Frank Act put new guardrails around the banking sector. For example, the country's biggest banks must now undergo periodic stress tests to prove they can survive another crisis and draw up living wills to be dismantled in an emergency without requiring a taxpayer bailout. Indeed, this crisis has showed us that nothing is a safe bet. Anything in the investment field can happen instantaneously. All these experts who are sometimes responsible for the echo chambers that are created are not the ones to be solely relied on. The machine will keep on churning if another crisis happens, most surely. Wait, you think that United States is going to experience hyperinflation as a result of number of dollars printed and distributed to markets that will lead investors and big banks to go on and hedge on riskier bets such as growth stocks that will take their price to earnings ratio on another level and will make the stocks more volatile because stocks cannot fail?
Object to the test!
I mean, logistics is the only cause for this hyperinflation argument that a lot of people are rambling about. There's no way for that to happen. I mean, double-digit inflation is practically impossible. Anyhow, none of this is a financial advice. You were listening to me for Rich. This is Hassan. And remember, always be good to yourselves, because you deserve it. Peace. So Nina, can you pay on your mortgages?
Does she look like she wants to pay?
No!
Does she look like she wants to pay?
No!